Of course, you also should contemplate how and where to display error messages in your applications. Different kinds of errors require different kinds of user interface. The app developer needs to choose the surface for the error based on the content and the consequences of the error. You need to use inline error text when the app cannot fix the error, but the user can. The users can continue to interact without fixing the error. For example, the user enters invalid text, something that isn't really an email, in an email input text box. In that case, you use text inline on the canvas, and this appears inline near the error. It might look something like this. You entered an incorrect password. Well, at that point, you'd put an error right on the canvas, and they'd have to try again. You can use an error or warning bar to notify of important errors and warnings. This would encourage the user to take an action. You position this at the top of the screen. You'll want to use a color from your app's palette, whatever you're using within the application, and you want to use the same color and layout for all error and warning bars. You'll probably want to create a procedure that displays all your error messages. In addition, don't use the little X glyph. Instead, use a close button. An error or warning bar might look something like this. We've talked about message dialogues before, but I'll repeat it here in this context. You only want to use them if a modal message is required because it blocks the user from further interaction until they've resolved this. And you want to make sure you only use this when it's absolutely required. It might look something like this. And you'd only use this in a situation where nothing else will solve the problem. You can't go on unless the user solves the problem. Your goal when building applications is to create applications that look good and work well across a variety of form factors, display sizes, and view states. The app should look good and work well on a tablet or a 30-inch monitor. It should look good at portrait mode or landscape mode, whether it's zoomed in or out. A view defines the way your app is accessed and manipulated by a user. For example, landscape or portrait orientation, full screen, snapped or fill view states, panable, zoomable, scaled or resized UI, and specific elements can help with this. And specific UI elements that can be involved, including the search results pane and the folder structure. All these represent different views that might be used as part of your application. A view describes the way users access and manipulate content in your application. They can view your app on devices of various sizes and orientations, and you need to plan for different view states, screen orientations, and user interaction views. For example, let's talk about view states. Your application needs to handle the snapped, fill, or full screen modes. Here is the snapped mode. This is where your application takes up the left or right portion of the screen and only a very narrow column of your application is showing. You'll want to make sure you format your application so it looks decent in that layout. Filled mode is when you have the larger portion of the screen, and again, you want to lay out your application so it looks good in that mode as well. The standard view mode is full screen, and of course your app needs to look good in that mode. The screen orientation can either be landscape or portrait, and you know what those look like. Full screen landscape is the sideways view, full screen portrait is the up and down view. Of course, in any view, you want to allow the user to interact with the data. Think about how to allow resizing, scrolling, panning, zooming, and semantic zoom, if at all possible, within your applications. And remember that semantic zoom allows the content to change as the users zoom. It's not just a physical zoom in on the pixels, it is giving a content-based zoom based on levels of hierarchy of your data. On each view, you'll need to take into account layouts. Layouts are mechanisms by which your app can accommodate the views it supports. For example, In landscape view, you might use a certain layout, where in portrait view, you use a different kind of layout. A layout allows you to style, structure, and present your app content using flexible controls like grids, multiple columns, connected frames, and flexible boxes that change their shape and size based on the view you have current. You need to adapt for multiple layouts. Normally, apps are designed to be viewed in full screen landscape mode. Everything we've seen so far in this course is designed for full screen landscape mode. But any Metro-style UI must adapt to different orientations and layouts. You have to handle both landscape and portrait. In landscape mode, you have to handle full screen, snapped, and filled modes. Generally, making apps look good in all modes requires a completely different layout for each of those view states. Now you need to be able to test. It's easy to test landscape layouts, full screen, snapped, and filled on a standard desktop, though I will mention you need to be running at a resolution of at least 1366 by 768 to use snapped or filled. All of my demonstrations so far have run at 1024 by 768, so I can't show you snapped or filled without doing some trickery. It's obviously more difficult to test portrait layout if you just have a standard desktop computer. But Visual Studio includes a simple solution. The simple solution is to run the application in the simulator. Visual Studio includes a simulator that sets up a remote access session with the current computer and formats it the way you specify. This allows for all layouts and varying resolutions. To do this, you select the simulator from the toolbar, and we'll show a demo of this very soon. Here's a hint. Design your application for all 4 view states. Don't make it something you do at the last minute. Design for all 4 view states. Your app will be run in every view state whether you want it to or not. It just will look bad if you don't design for that view state. Any state that you neglect to design for will definitely look bad when a user selects it. So, without fail, design for landscape, portrait, snapped, and filled view states. Let's try out the simulator in Visual Studio so you get a feel for how it works. I've loaded an application that you've already seen in an earlier portion of this course into Visual Studio, that is, our Hello World application. Let me run it again to remind you what this application does. Not much, actually. You enter a name, click the Click Me button, and then it displays a message, and you can change the font of that message with a slider if you like. I've run it here in the whole full screen computer window, but that won't allow me to test portrait mode or snapped or filled mode because I'm running at such a low resolution. The answer then, let me stop debugging, is to use the simulator. And you'll see here on the debug toolbar an option to choose where I want to debug this. I can debug it on the local machine, on a simulator, or something very exciting, you can debug it on a remote machine and even still manage to be able to single step, have breakpoints, and so on. But for now, I'll choose simulator. And if I press F5 to run, it will run now within the simulator. And I can again set breakpoints and so on. Let me press F5 to run. This will build it and load it into Visual Studio Simulator. And there is the simulator window. And it's running now in a separate window. And this window allows me to change the resolution if I like, and I can change the orientation. Here is an option to change resolution. For example, I could switch to 2560 by 1440 if I like, and all that does, of course, is make the window look very, very small on my screen. It's trying to, let me say sure. Looks like things got upset because I did that. I'll just press cancel. And this actually is a remote desktop session onto my own computer here. So it's not like a separate virtual machine. It is this machine. Well, that doesn't appear very happy. So let me come here and debug, stop debugging. Looks like changing the resolution messed up another application I was running on my computer. So let's start it once again and try again. There's the application, and you can see now that I've simulated a very high resolution monitor, my application shows very small. Let's put things back the way they were. Go to 1366 by 768, which again is the smallest resolution that supports snap and filled mode. If I enter a value here, press click me, it still works. And now if I come and hover up here in the left-hand corner, I should get an option to drag out another application, that's just my desktop, and it is snapped on that left portion of the screen. I can also make the right-hand portion snapped, and as you can see, that doesn't really look very good because now the button has gone away. I can also change it to portrait mode by rotating. It starts up a new session with the computer, and hopefully it will run the application again. I may have to go out to the desktop and look for it. It should be here somewhere. Hello world, there it is. And there's the application now running in portrait view on the simulator here. You'll find the simulator very helpful for laying out and testing your application in different view states.